Hey guys, Daniel here with Value Investing with Daniel. Thank you for tuning into this video. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone, all my subscribers, for subscribing to the channel. We've hit 100 subscribers, 106 last time I checked when this video is being published. So thank you very much for subscribing. I really appreciate it. I hope you're enjoying the content of the videos. I'm going to do my best to continue to put out good content for you guys, so thank you very much. The topic of this video is going to be about the minimum amount of reading that you'll have to do in terms of analyzing a company to what I think have an adequate amount of knowledge to be able to make a decision to invest or not. So the minimum amount of reading in terms of a company's annual reports and filings that I believe is necessary before making any sort of substantial investment is pretty much what I've listed here on the screen. And this is, remember, what I consider to be the absolute minimum. The key thing to keep in mind is a lot of this information will be summarized on websites like YCharts and so forth that show you 20, 30, 40 years worth of company data. That's why I say that this is probably the minimum that you'll have to do. And the reason is because a lot of the information is sort of condensed on websites like, let's say, YCharts, where you can look at, the company's 20 years worth of let's say their 20 years worth of revenues, 20 years worth of the gross income, 20 years worth of free cash flows, and you can see it all condensed, their balance sheet and so forth. So, but I still believe that you should still be reading the annual reports of a company, and I think that reading 10 years worth of annual reports is probably what I would recommend most people to do as an absolute minimum still. In terms of the annual reports, this whole thing here that I'm listing, although it will vary company to company, will probably take you about 3 days worth of work to get through. When we're talking about an annual report, I mean, most annual reports are about 90 pages long. So if we're looking at reading 10 annual reports, it's about 900 pages of reading. If we give, roughly a minute to each page, it's going to be about 900 minutes. 900 minutes. If we're looking at it in terms of hours of work, it'll take us about 15 hours to read 10 annual reports, let's say, roughly speaking. It obviously depends. Some annual reports are much easier to read, some are a little bit more complicated. But I would say, as a general rule, just to read all the annual reports will take you about 15 hours, which is probably, for most people, you'll probably have to divide that up into about 2 or 3 days. So you'll probably read the latest, let's say the last 3 years worth of annual reports, today, then tomorrow you'll read the 3 prior to that, and the day after maybe we'll read the last 4 remaining or something along those lines. But it'll probably take you about 15 hours to get through all the annual reports, about 10 years worth of annual reports, which is what I recommend that you do. And keep in mind, I mean, we're 2023, 10 years is only going back to 2013, and some companies have histories going way before that. I don't think it's necessary to really read annual reports past, further back than maybe 20 years. I think anything beyond that is pretty much overkill. Like, I just don't think it's necessary. The business has probably changed so much, it's not even really relevant. But definitely the last 10 years I think is necessary, and that'll probably take you about 15 hours to do, which is not that long if you think about it. I mean, 15 hours, 5 hours a day, like I say, within 3 days you've pretty much read all the last 10 years worth of annual reports for the company. Then we got the earnings calls. I recommend listening to the last 20 earnings calls. Typically, they do them like every quarter. You can also read the transcripts, but I like listening to them. I just put them on fast forward and listen through them. It depends, again, company to company. Usually they're about an hour long, so if you're listening at 2 times speed, that's 30 minutes. So that'll probably take you another 10 hours to listen to the last 20 earnings calls. So we're at 15 hours. We add another 10 to listen to the last 20 earnings calls. We're at 25 hours worth of work so far for a single company that we're very interested in investing in. And keep in mind, I only recommend you start doing this at the last stage, right? Like literally the last stage, right? So, what I do is I look at, let's say, 20 years worth of data, all the most important things for a company. And once companies get through my filtration process and they're sort of at the very end, that's when I do these things. Obviously I can't do this for every single company as a starting point. It would be impossible, right? There's simply not enough time. But when companies go through my different levels of screener, and then finally I'm dealing with, and companies get to this point, this is like 50% of companies I then invest in, or 50% now, I don't, based on what's on the annual report. So this is the last stage, basically, is what I'm saying. So we're saying we do the annual reports, we read or listen to the earnings calls, and then what I recommend you do is you watch a couple of YouTube videos from other value investors about the company if they're available. If it's a more obscure company, you're going to have a little bit of difficulty finding any real YouTube videos about it. But some companies there are there are YouTube videos out there about it. One of the companies I invested in, which was Smith and Wesson, recently, I did see a couple of YouTube videos about it, and that's a small, small cap company. So there are videos out there about companies, but you won't find it about everything. But if you do it, it's worth to search it and see what other people have to say for sure. And let's say a YouTube video, maybe that 5 YouTube videos is maybe an hour worth of content in total. So now we're up to 26 hours worth of work. News articles is where it can get infinitely crazy. I mean, there's especially when you're dealing with big companies, there's so much material out there. You got to really screen through what's important. Maybe you read 10 news articles about the company. I don't think reading more than that is really worth it, but you should read some news articles and have a little sense of what's going on in the news in terms of the company. Forums also could be a good resource. It'll depend, if it's Reddit, it's probably completely garbage. If it's like the Value Investing Forum, which is its own website, I think it's called Value Investing Forum or Value Investors Club, that could have some really good content on there. So it's definitely worth screening on that and looking to see if there's any sort of content on there about the company that you're looking at. And then reading the last 1 to 2 years worth of press releases for the company. Most of them are irrelevant, but some of them could have some little sort of things in there that are worth looking for. Again, that'll probably take you another hour to go through. So in total, we're looking at about 27 hours worth of work before, choosing to invest. But again, this is just a rough guide. It'll always vary company to company. Some companies will require much more work. Other companies will not require a lot of work. So it's just something to keep in mind that if you're willing to do the work and research your companies, it'll probably take you a good amount of time, like 27 hours. I mean, so that's probably looking at about 3-4 days worth of work before you make the final call to invest or not. And again, I just want to reiterate, this is what you should be doing at the end of the investment cycle, right? So at the end of your flow, right? So you start off with screeners, maybe you screen for certain characteristics. You come up with a list of companies, maybe 50, 60 companies long. You look through them one by one on something like Y charts, where you can see the condensed financial information, balance sheets, and so forth. Then probably from there, you're probably eliminating a lot of them. And then once you're finally down to your core set of companies that you're looking to invest in, then you'll probably do all this here and then wind up with 1 or 2 that you're very comfortable with that you wind up investing in. So the point of this video is, this is the minimum amount of material I think you need to read. 10 years worth of annual reports, listen to the last 20 earnings calls, a couple of YouTube videos if they're available about the company, read some news articles, go on the forum, see if anybody else is writing up about this company and what their opinions are, and then read the last couple of years worth of press releases. I think if you do this at a minimum, you'll be a lot safer than just going off of condensed financial information off of websites like Y charts, for example. Although that's where I would recommend you start. So I hope the video was informative. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you again for the 100 subscribers. Be sure to like the video, and if you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section down below. Thanks.